So, hello everybody to the lecture Macroeconomics. You are right now, so to speak, in your medium studies. You have heard already some lectures the last semesters. Just in case that you don't know me, I'm Bernard Köster and I'm here a professor for economics and quantitative methods, so every topic you really like. But I think we will do it and we will manage it because right now in our actual days, this topic of macroeconomics is, I think, a really interesting one. And maybe it's more interesting than it should be. A little bit more boring times would be also quite nice. So just 2, 3 years ago, we had times with 10% inflation rate. So if you still go to disco and you are drinking something, then I think you really actually also right now think 4 years ago it was everything was quite cheaper than before. Also, if we look at our country here in Germany, then we are in a quite serious situation. Maybe we are shrinking economically the third year in a row, which is not a very, which are not very good news for a society. And I don't think that I have to talk about the guy overseas. Maybe right now he's only playing golf, though he is nothing. He does nothing in the internet and announcing something which is really disturbing exchange rates, stock markets, or economics global, the global economy in general. So to speak neutrally, really interesting times for a macro economist because unfortunately we have to deal with the guy on the left overseas. We have also to deal with the guy on the other side in Russia because this country, the largest country in the world, is not a big surprise, the largest country for raw materials, especially for energy, and we rely on energy, and also our connections to China are also not that easy as they were if we go back 10 years backwards. So overall, quite interesting times, and I hope that we can also discuss within these lectures these topics and what is our view on the economy in general. But before we go into detail, let me start with the organization of this lecture. I think everybody is, oh, this is, but anyway, um, let's shrink this. Anybody of you is within the Moodle course, and there I also announced that I didn't came back from Corona times out of the digital world. Well, I'm also here, but I'm still also in the digital world. And this is a reason because I do, so to speak, three-polar lecture. So in parallel, we have the Zoom meeting and the classical lecture here in the lecture hall. And after every lecture, if I have no technical problems, then I also will upload every lecture in Moodle, and I will also upload my edited slides. But I really recommend that you also think within the lecture about what I'm talking. I'm not also writing everything on the slides, what I'm talking about, and maybe, or not maybe, it is a good idea that you edit your slides in your own words too, because also my handwriting is not the very best. You will see. If you cannot read anything anymore, then just give me a hint that I should have a look at my handwriting in this case. So, the last 2 semesters I had almost no problem with to technically record my lectures and upload it. Maybe one is missing or something because something happens, but I think it will be possible. Well, but also, although I provide all these digital stuffs of this lecture, in the end, you want to pass this module, this lecture, and the exam, and therefore I recommend that it is not a good idea just to sit back and say, well, I get everything on YouTube in Moodle at my homepage, and then I start to recapitulate in December what we have done. Because, yeah, we will have roughly 22 times that we are meeting here together, and every time is roughly 90 minutes. And to just have a look at 20 videos, 90 times 90 minutes, that is not possible to have a look at these videos within 3, 4, or 5 days. So be careful and be in the lecture. Well, of course, you can also have a look at it at weekends or in the evening because I'm providing it. But just starting to recapitulate the content of this lecture just before the beginning of the exam, this would be not the best idea, I would say. And yeah, so before I come in with a little bit more detail to the exam, in general, you will find the content of this lecture on my homepage. Lectures, and then you have here macroeconomics, and this is active. So here you will find the lecture slides which will talk about, and in this part here I will provide a link to the video, and I will also provide here the edited slides so you can download them. Additionally, on my homepage you will find also some teaching videos about content of economics in general. Just have a click inside these videos. Well, if you ask for explain me what is inflation about or something like this in Google, then you will find a million of videos in the internet. Why I'm doing it also? Well, I have to admit, I looked at some of these videos and there are many quite very good videos about this content, but there is also very much stuff where the explanations are not very good, and especially I would say these very short videos. Explain what is inflation about within 3 or 5 minutes, and then I read the comments below this video and I find, well, the first time I have understood what is inflation about, and all the professors and the lecturers, they are talking something about something what I do not understand. Well, if you have a look at these videos, then in the best way you could say it's too short, it's maybe superficial, but also sometimes it's wrong what is talked there within these videos. And yeah, this is not a big surprise, because the reason why you are sitting here is that you want to learn something. And so you want to learn something when you are not already know everything about these topics. And this means you have the problem by clicking on these videos in the internet that you don't know, is this good information or not so good information, what I get there. I don't know, maybe in other lectures in marketing or business administration, you have already talked about this general problem of market failure, of asymmetry of information. And in the education sector, there is this very general problem that we have asymmetry between information. Hopefully, I know what I'm talking about. And you are sitting here because you not already know everything about these topics. So be careful using the internet. The other way around, please use the internet. There is the information, and learn to distinguish what is relevant information, what is not so relevant. And additionally, during the last 3 years, after the upcoming of especially ChatGPT and afterwards all the other AI tools, this is really a great technological change. Please use it. Start to use, get used to it, because you can really shrink your time you have to invest in understanding things. But also, as general, as I've spoken about the information in the internet, be careful using it and use it in the right way. Use it as a tool, the AI tools, to make you better. Not just, well, I can type in the question, pressing enter, and then I can go downtown in the disco, and I do not have to do anything anymore, because everything else is doing AI for me. Well, then you have to think about yourself. If this is the only thing you can do after 3-4 years of studies, then why should somebody hire you if you cannot do anything else than the AI tools? But these AI tools are really, really helpful, that you can do many things quite faster and even better. And so I come back to the exam in this lecture, because this is somehow developing what I'm doing here. I think it is quite different to other exams you are writing in the other modules, in the other lectures. There, generally, you will write maybe a classical exam meeting and writing 90 minutes or 2 hours, answering some specific questions. Or you are doing some term paper, you are doing some project work for 6 weeks or something like this. And this is somehow something in between. because I cannot give you an exam with very individualized term papers of about 20 pages. You are sitting here with roughly 30, 40 guys, and I have also the German version in parallel to this lecture, another 40 guys, and in the end I will then have 120 guys who want to write the exam, and then it's not possible for me to write 120 term papers. But what I can do is, and this kind of exam I started to develop 1 year ago, is to write a, so to speak, short exam, a short term paper. So you will have time. What have I written down here? In the last week of the lecture of 5-6 days, and then you will get an individualized task which is quite similar to a classical exam you are writing in the lecture hall within 90 minutes or 2 hours. Quite similar, but only quite similar. Because I also ask myself, and here again the AI steps in. If I ask you just the standard questions, which I can ask within 90 minutes, well, then I can ask you some definitions and then explain, for example, or define what is GDP, gross domestic product, the indicator with which we are measuring economic growth. And then I asked some 1 or 2 additional questions about this indicator. Or in the second part, the first part of this lecture will be highly descriptive. So in general, we will describe the actual economic situation of especially the German economy and also internationally. And then in the second part, this will be more theoretical. There we will talk about models with which we want to describe the whole economy. And yeah, in a classical exam, then I can ask you some part of these models. Because you have only 90 minutes, I cannot ask you to do the calculation of the whole model because it takes too long. It is not possible. But if you have time of 5-6 days, then I can say, well, here's the problem. Please take this model, and then I can give you a larger task to analyze this model. Because at the first day, maybe Monday or so, you are starting and you think about, well, what do I have to do? Then putting back this sheet of paper and you restart then the second day, then you find something, and the third day you say, well, great, now I have the solution. And you can also redo the calculation. Maybe I ask something, calculate the price level or something like this. And then in an exam of 90 minutes, you end up with a price of -€2. Well, actually, in energy prices, we have in Leipzig at the stock of energy in Germany, there you have negative prices, but negative prices are very special. So in general, we think that prices are positive. So if you end up within 90 minutes with a task with a negative price, then more or less you know, well, I have done something wrong. And to find this mistake you have done in this situation is quite hard. But if you end up at after the second day with a negative price, then maybe you can say, well, I will redo the calculation the next day. So this is a possibility that I can ask you more general things because you have not this time pressure. And the reason why I think this is a quite good idea to do this is also the AI. The standard questions about the lecture, which I can pose in a 90 minutes test, this and I try this I more or less can just feed in the PDF into ChatGPT, just try it, pressing enter, and in general you will get an output, I would say at least a 3, so medium, maybe better. So for me then it's only possible to ask you something which AI can already do. And I think you have to be able, when you're finished, when you get your degree, that you can use AI and that you can do something else, something additionally to the possibilities of AI. And therefore, of course, you have time of 5 days preparing this term paper. Of course, you can use AI and you should use it, because if you can use it in a good way, then you will be faster than doing every calculation by hand. But on the other side, and this I just tried the last weeks, be careful using AI for calculations, because still it is a stochastic algorithm. Well, actually, this was just the situation when ChatGPT was released just in the first week by chance. I hadn't a look at it, but just by chance in the first week, I saw that it was released and I tried it and I said, wow, this is great, the output of this. But then I quite fast saw in the beginning, even the easiest calculations, 1 prompt out of 10, you got a wrong answer by just cutting 2 straight lines and calculating the intersection of 2 lines. But this has drastically improved. So especially within these AI algorithms, the AI then quite often then chooses just to do calculations with a mathematical program. And in general, mathematical programs like Maple, like Mathematica, anything else, they do not miscalculate. But still, and this I saw the last weeks when I just tried this, when I learned, well, now they use these highly sophisticated mathematical programs, that still the AI doesn't know for 100% when I have to use the mathematical programs, in opposite to just look in a stochastical way, is there anything what I have been trained for. So I found that still the output can be wrong. Well, this does not mean that you should not use it, but this means that again you have to know when you use it, or you have to have an idea what will be the result, what will be a reasonable answer, and then you see when you use it, well, the outcome is a negative price, and then you know, okay, there has to be something wrong in the calculation. So use it, but be careful in using it. And I really recommend not only in this lecture, but in every exam, every lecture. In 2-3 years, when you are ready with your degree and you are going to the labor market, in 99 out of 100 cases, I think you have to use AI in the work you will do. Okay, so do I have everything almost for the organization of the lecture? Yeah, so in general, especially the content of this lecture, I will provide about via my private homepage, and all organizational stuff here will be in Moodle. And I will only communicate. Where is Moodle? There. Oh, anyway, or there. This one. Good. Here we are. So if there is changing something in the organization, then I will provide the information here, and I will communicate also via your student email accounts. And if you want to contact me, then just write me an email or just come after the lecture. And my office is just here down the floor on the left side, knocking on the door, knock on the door and just see if I'm in, and then we can talk. Yeah, organization. This is very important because your head of your studies has been came to me and said, well, your lectures are on Tuesdays, and your lecture should not be on Tuesday, because next week and then I think 3 times you will be in Elsfleth. Or no, not here. Okay, okay. So uh, and there is another thing that unfortunately I will supposed to be 3 or 4 meetings where I have to go this semester, also Tuesdays. Actually, today I have to leave at about 1:15. Then I have to go to Elsfleth because there's a meeting of the Senate of our university, and therefore I switch in general the lecture to Wednesday 10 o'clock or 10:15. And Tim Nieberg said that this shouldn't collide with your timetable, but only the Thursday appointment will be still there. And then at 12:15 I will have the German lecture. So this shouldn't have happened, but I haven't got the information that you are not in 3 times on Tuesdays, and well, that I will have these meetings I have to go for because of the organization of the university in general. Therefore, I switch Tuesday, oops, to Wednesday 10:15. I have to look for a room, but we will meet on Thursday. I hope that I have organized everything then on Thursday. Okay, but if there is anybody of you where you have a collusion with some other lecture, I will provide everything in the digital way. So then you can also use the videos and just also talk to your fellow students. This is also always a good idea, not studying alone, but with your fellow students in order to get the information. So then that it is, I think. So my question is there anything you want at this point in time to know? Yep. Yeah. Then I will switch the whole semester to Wednesday. Because also maybe I have to switch rooms right now in order to find some. Okay. Yep. Yes. Yep. Yeah, this is not changed right now because I haven't given the information to the guys. They are so you will have only um, one. This is the exam and the other one, the classical exam in January. This we will skip. Yep. And within the lecture, then I also will talk about the topic of this exam. Well, I also already said to you, maybe I can ask in more detail due to the models we are talking about. And what I also can do within such an exam is that I not only ask you, well, prices today are and prices tomorrow are, please calculate the inflation rate. Because, in this case, I also can provide you or ask you to do a little time series analysis, really using data and then, for example, calculating average inflation rates for the last 50 years, 15 years of some. 50 is not a good choice. We could do it, but it is not a good choice to calculate this for the last 15 years of some specific country maybe. And then also calculating unemployment rates or something like this. And then I can ask, well, do you see anything if you look at these indicators? Okay, so but then I'm done with this. Oh, this is the wrong slides. Yeah, if you want to contact me, just write me an email or come to my room. And then I recommend also that you have a look in the things other guys are providing, reading books, reading ebooks, or there are also online lectures of other universities. Here especially I can in general recommend, oops, maybe you already know this. Well, we of course are the best university in the world, but then there is the second best university in the world, or some of the second best universities in the world. And although Mr. Trump said, well, I will not give them any money, they are still more or less one of the best universities, MIT in Boston and in the neighborhood Harvard. This was in the news, and especially if we want to use some indicator, is a university a good university? Then we can ask, and in December We will have it also the Nobel Prize in economics. I will then also provide the information what is the Nobel Prize in economics this year. When it comes out in December, then you can also ask which university in the world has the most Nobel Prize winners, not only in economics but in general. What do you think? Which university is it? Maybe there are some. Pardon? It's in the United States. It is Harvard, yeah. And then I just had a look after this announcement of Mr. Trump. How many of these Nobel Prize winners of Harvard have a migrant background? So were not born in the United States. I came to roughly 1/3, even more. Well, and these guys he doesn't want to have anymore within his country. This is really a great idea. And oh, this I want to say here, this open course wave, this is MIT, the neighbor university of Harvard, and you will find here also Harvard lectures within it. They started about 15, 20 years providing all their online stuff. And then, well, let's see, macroeconomics. Caballero, this is a really famous economist. Anybody else I know? Olivier Prolonchard, you will find here the book I will recommend. This guy was the head of economics at the International Monetary Fund for many years. Darren Acemoglu, does anybody know this guy? Nobel Prize winner last year. So here you find all these maybe quite good lectures if you have a look at it. Yeah, back to this great idea to push out all these foreign guys out of your country. This is not a new idea. There was already some country to do this, to pull out all the smartest guys in the country to say, well, you are not welcome anymore. Do you know which country this is? Pardon? I wouldn't say this. Well, right now after the Brexit, they said to some, but not in general, I would say. Well, you are sitting in this country. Germany, roughly 100 years ago, in the 1930s, maybe you know what happened in Germany. And one general thing was that we said we will push out especially all our Nobel Prize winners, especially in natural sciences. In the beginning of the 19th century, more or less 50% of the Nobel Prize winners came from Germany. And unfortunately, or not unfortunately, well, or for them, unfortunately, many of these guys were Jewish, and then they had to leave Germany. So the end was that this was not the best decision in an economic sense to push out all the smart guys. Because what is, especially if we saw it here, economic growth, the lecture of Darren Acemoglu, economic growth in the long run is just about improving technology. And technology will be improved if you have smart guys with new ideas. So we will see if what happens to the United States in the next years doing this, what they are doing. So back to our books. In general, this is an introductory course into macroeconomics. So more or less every introductory book you find, I can recommend. I have written down here some special books, and especially if you look at Mankiw Taylor, this is maybe the most known macroeconomic textbook in the world. And as I said already, social science is, or economics is a social science. So in opposite to natural science, where we can always redo experiments, and maybe you have seen my CV. In my former life, I did a degree in physics, and then you can redo 100 times the experiment, and then you know the apple is falling down with an acceleration of 9 meters per second squared. And then you more or less know this is the case. In social science, we want to describe ourselves, what we are doing. Well, and then we say we have something like a law. I think in microeconomics, you talked about the law of demand. Do you know, or have you talked about this? What is called the law of demand? I don't know. Maybe he said this. Law of demand more or less says the lower the price, the more I buy. Well, but I can say I don't care. I buy more when the price is higher. And so in social science, there is no right or wrong. There is, in my opinion, a good model or a good explanation and a not so good explanation. And the main thing is that all the guys who say, well, you have to do this when energy prices come up or when government debt is increasing, because of their argumentation and their assumptions. And in general, the different models differ because of different assumptions. And within this lecture, we will talk more or less about two different schools of thinking. One is the neoclassical way, and the other one is the so-called Keynesian view. This Keynesian view comes from the economist John Maynard Keynes in the beginning of the 20th century. And he had then a quite different view compared to the neoclassical view. The neoclassical view more or less says you have your market, quantity and prices, and you have supply and you have demand, and the intersection is the equilibrium. And the neoclassical view says, well, we are going every time quite fast into the equilibrium. So more or less, the state of the economy is in general around or within the equilibrium, because prices can really fast change. And then this guy, John Maynard Keynes, said, well, of course, there is supply, there is demand, and prices are changing. But it then in general said, well, in a macroeconomic way, maybe somehow in some situations, prices are not changing that fast as you are assuming. And think if prices not adjust directly, but it takes 6 months, a year, then this has, of course, an impact on your economic policy. And therefore, I chose these different books because more or less what one could say that this book of Mankiw is more or less a neoclassical view on the economy. Of course, you find also within this book all the models, the Keynesian models, but then if you read it, then maybe you see, well, it just rely a little bit more on the neoclassical view. Also Barrow, maybe also neoclassical. And then you have this guy here, Mr. Krugman. Does anybody know Paul Krugman? He is also a Nobel laureate, and he is maybe one of the most known economists nowadays. If you go to the New York Times, he has there a quite famous blog where he is always talking with other guys about actual macroeconomics issues or the economy in general. Just have a look at the Krugman blog at New York Times. And then I would say Olivier Blanchard, I also already said, a former head of economics at the International Monetary Fund. This is maybe a book somehow in between. And well, therefore, I would say just have also a look in these books, in these different views, in different explanations. On the other side, you also want to pass the exam. Everything what I'm doing here is relevant for the exam. Well, I will not say chapter 10 in Blanchard, additionally chapter 5a in Mankiw, and in the Krugman book, chapter 3 or something like this. But have a look in the other books. Here, Burda Wirplosh, all these books are focusing a little bit more on the US economy and also with an international view. And this Burda Wirplosh is more focused on the European economy. You find also there the numbers for Europe, especially the Eurozone and the European Union. And within my lecture, I will generally provide economic data for Germany to you. And then you see here the last two ones, since I'm always in the end running out of time, and this is an introductory course, I cannot go, especially in theory, in that detail within this lecture. And if there is somebody who is a little bit more interested about the technique behind the model, then have a look in these books. There, actually, if you look in these books, then you will find a lot of more formulas than in the other books. Okay, so then this I have already said. Well, this also, if you go to sometimes to my colleagues and you are clicking through their slides, then quite often they look very similar because they just downloaded the slides of the book of Blanchard or of Mankiw. And well, I would say if Olivier Blanchard or Taylor, because Mankiw is quite old right now, if they are giving their lectures about their books, this would be quite good. But if I just read another book from another guy, I don't think this would be a good lecture. And therefore, still, I'm of the opinion that it is, especially in social sciences, where there is no right or wrong, that I give you my own lecture and also, of course, then my own view on these things. So the rest I have already said. And then I also already said this. The starting point, in my opinion, is a good status quo description. And not only in macroeconomics, also in business administration, in investment and financing. Also, if you have a good idea what is right now my situation, what is the situation of my company, the economic situation. And therefore, I recommend that you really start to go into the data. Here also, AI is helpful. You can just ask him, well, give me a time series, and then the AI is searching for you in the internet, but still you afterwards have to have an idea what is the quality of the data I got. And therefore, I also recommend that you go directly in the data banks. And for Germany, as for every other country, it is always a good idea to have a look at the statistical offices of these countries. There you will find, in Germany, you will more or less find everything. And for macroeconomic issues, of course, going to the central banks, the Bundesbank, the Fed, Bank of England, European Central Bank. Then for Europe as a whole, European Statistical Office, Eurostat, and for a broader view, International Monetary Fund, of course, the World Bank. If you have later on additional international topics, you have the module finance or something like this at the World Bank, I think you will find data for your topics. Then you have to write your term paper about. Yeah, this is the Bundesagentur für Arbeit, the German labor organization, and SVR. This is my former employment. This is the Council of Economic Advisors, and I worked for them during the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. Very interesting times. Well, in 2008, 2009, we thought, well, this is absolutely, neutrally spoken, amazing what happens during these 2 years out of everything. After that came the Euro crisis, not that volatile as the financial crisis. Then, so 2018, 2019, we thought, well, now we are on the track to normal times, so to speak. January, February, March 2020, Corona, even more volatile. After Corona, there was a hope that then we have a consolidation also globally, that we have seen this was a global crisis of almost everything. But what happened? The war in Ukraine, Gaza, and also the clash of the United States with the administration of Donald Trump, the direction China is moving right now. So everything is different. So during the last 15 years, more or less, crisis and crisis and crisis and crisis. So from a macroeconomic point of view, very, very interesting times. Okay, and then on the right, these are scientific institutes, especially in Germany. We are quite happy due to our federal structure. Almost every region has its own research institute in economics. So again, if you have some topics in other modules and you are looking for some paper about your topic, just pass by these scientific institutions. You will find 2, 3, 4 guys who have already written a paper or something about the topic you should write your term paper about. And really start to use this and to read scientific papers, studies, and so on. In the end, there is coming the bachelor thesis, and this should then be more or less your first really scientific work you should do. And for this, you should be able to read what other guys in a scientific way have written or have done. And yeah, these here are all then international economic institutions in Europe and in the United States. Okay, that's it. And then let's start with the content with a smile at first. What is all this about? It's quite hard to define this, but unfortunately there is no general questions. So with a smile, economics is what economists do. So more or less a self-fulfilling prophecy. We invented our topic that I have a job, so to speak. Anyway, or Kurt Tucholsky, a German guy, having written famous books. He wrote National Economics is, if people wonder why they do not have any money, there are many reasons. The most meaningful reasons are the scientific ones. So also just only with a smile, what is the purpose of this? Almost nothing, he is saying. Anyway, then I try to give you a definition, and then I found something, also one in Menkyu, in his textbook. Economics is the study of how society manages its scarce resources, about scarce resources, that demand is coming out of this, profit maximization, and all this you have already talked in microeconomics. And then macroeconomics, what is the society doing about this? Or economics is the study of how human beings coordinate their wants. These are your preferences, your utility functions and desires, given the decision-making mechanisms, social customs, and political realities of the society. So also about the economic framework of our society. And the last one here you see, Krugman again. Economics is the study of economies at both the level of individuals and society as a whole. So there is then microeconomics and macroeconomics coming together. Well, in general, we could say in Germany we have roughly 80 million inhabitants. So we are looking at 80 million utility functions, taking the first and second derivative, setting the first derivatives to 0, and then solving to our budget constraints. Then we have 80 million demand curves, and then aggregating these demand curves horizontally, we get the overall demand curve. Well, you already see this would be a very hard task to do in practice. And therefore, then we are just starting to aggregate before that we are not doing 80 million individual utility maximization, solving utility maximization problems, but that we in general aggregate our variables, and then we have something like unemployment rate, inflation, economic growth, and so on. Yeah, how is an economic analysis done? This is always really the starting point. And I really recommend that you learn how to do it, to do a really good status quo description of your situation right now. And then if you have collected all these data and aggregated the variables, having calculated average growth rates, averages of some numbers, then you do your model building. And why are you doing this? You want to explain at the first step ex post. I want to build a model and then I see if I can explain with this model what has happened in the past. And if this model works, then I make these, so to speak, past future symmetry, that then I said, well, I'm extrapolating my model into the future. And then I'm doing here the forecasting stuff. Well, I do the forecast, and in general, economic forecasts are roughly 2 years, 3 years. And then time is going by. And after 1, 2, 3 years, then you have again a look back. What have I announced for economic growth and what has happened? Did it match or did it not match? How can I explain it? And yeah, in this stuff, I'm roughly about 10, 15 years since my time at the Council of Economic Advisors. Later on, I also was at the Handelsblatt, the largest economic newspaper in Germany. And with them together, I'm doing every 3 months an economic forecast for Germany. And we will also talk about this after the first part when we have done the whole description, because just 2 weeks ago we did our last forecast. And right now I'm not that happy that I'm right, or we are right, or more or less the last 18, 24 months we are quite good in what we have forecasted. And I'm not very happy about this, because we forecasted the downturn of the German economy. And many other economic institutions, they always said, well, after Corona, well, there is this pushback and now not everything is all right, but we will have this upswing. And in the end of Corona in 22, we said, well, look at the general situation. Also, before the start of the Ukraine war, look at the general situation of the German economy. It will be not that easy to get an automatic upswing. And then came, of course, Ukraine war, the war in Gaza, and the second administration and Trump. Of course, all this flattens the economic perspectives. And yeah, but even in this situation right now, we are almost the only ones who says that we will shrink in the third year in the row for 25. The other institutions say that there will be a slight economic growth. But we will see in December then, or the numbers will come out in January. Yeah, and not only doing these forecasts, and also if we are convinced about the things we are doing, then of course we also make recommendations to the government, to politicians in general. And this is then, so to speak, a split. And what we are doing, or what I hope I do here, of course, you will get also my view on the economy. But in general, I hope that I can provide you more or less a neutral view. I will also present you different views on the economy, different models of explanation of the whole economy. And with this, we try then to explain the world. And afterwards, I hope that you can then also make your own explanations. That you say, well, I have learned something. There are quite good explanations, and I think this is the relevant one. Now interest rates, employment, inflation are going in this or this direction, and then your meaning is in the next 2 years is happening something. And this, of course, can differ from my view. And then if we go to the politicians, to the government, then of course we not only say, well, I have the view and I think that I'm right with my view, but then I say, well, the situation of Germany, if we go on like this, and then we will maybe shrink a fourth time in a row, and after this we will have social problems in Germany when the cake is shrinking, and therefore let's change the world because of my view. And then we are working as an advisor. And then what kind of advices I give will, of course, be dependent on my own conviction, which model I think is in this situation the best one or a good one. And this will be then the last part for today. So we can then distinguish what we are doing as economists. And one is that we are talking about positive issues. We have a neutral look at the world. Something is happening. Of course, I'm not happy that I say that the growth rate for Germany will be negative in 2025. I'm not happy about this, but this is my neutral view because of my explanations. And this, if it's neutral, then we call this positive issues. And if I say, well, now I judge it, this is bad and therefore we have to do this, or I'm of the opinion that we have to do the following thing, then it is a normative issue when we are judging the functioning. And this, of course, is based, as at the former slide, on my own conviction, and this is, of course, not neutral. And in order to explain this maybe a little bit better in the end of this lecture today, let's try, or you should think about these examples here, these sentences. Is it a positive or is it a normative statement? A minimum wage causes unemployment of low-skilled workers. I think in microeconomics you have talked about minimum and maximum prices and what the impact on markets is then. Yes, this is positive. So the first thing is then we could say we assume that the labor market is functioning, and then we are introducing a minimum wage. In Germany, it's roughly 13 euro 60 or something like this right now. And then we can think of, well, wages, labor, labor supply, and labor demand. This would be the equilibrium wage rate. And of course, then we have to make another assumption. It will be only binding if the minimum wage is above the equilibrium wage rate. Let's suppose it would be here. And this then would mean this is the equilibrium employment, labor demand. The entrepreneurs will hire less people the higher the wage rate. So it's going down. And this difference then between the equilibrium employment and the minimum wage rate employment, this would be then unemployment. Well, and in general, of course, this minimum wage rate will be somewhere in the area of low-skilled labor. Of course, setting just a minimum wage rate of 25 euros per hour, this would really disturb our economy and nobody will do it. So these are, so to speak, the assumptions behind it, but there is no judgment. We do not say this is good or bad. We just explain it, assuming we have a functioning labor market. Then we should not be surprised that after introduction of a minimum wage rate will cause additional unemployment. So next one. The higher income of some people due to the introduction of a minimum wage rate outweigh the higher unemployment of other people. Positive, normative. Pardon? Normative, yeah? Explanation? So could you try where's the judgment? Yeah, definitely. That's it. So we have two issues which are positive. We have already talked. There will be some additional unemployment. They will have less afterwards. But of course, there will be also some guys who, before the introduction of the, because still we have here, not everybody is fired. There are now people who earn more because the wage rate may be increased from 8 to 12 euros per hour now due to the minimum wage rate. They are more wealthy or wealthier, and then we could say this we find good, and since there are people who are better off now, we say the number of these people overall for the society, this we say is an overall beneficial situation for the society. And this is, of course, then a judgment. Increasing oil prices, increasing the demand for e-mobility. At first, think of the argumentation behind it. Maybe think on about your microeconomics courses. What is the argumentation? Or is it just rubbish? Is it stupid what I've written down here? Yep. Yeah, and can you try to explain what kind of mechanism is behind this statement? Yeah, of course. But why? Yeah, great. This is. So we say, well, we have two vehicles, one E and one with a combustion engine. And then we have the cost structure. The variable cost is the oil price of the combustion engine. And so the price of this car is increasing, and it is a perfect substitute because in my view a car is just to go from point A to point B. So they are more or less perfect substitutes. And then if the price of the perfect substitute is increasing, then the demand for my good, the e-car, is increasing. Great. So argumentation via Perfect. Substitutes. And if you remember it, these are these cross elasticities. So how is my demand reacting on the change of the price of another good? Car manufacturers of combustion engines have to incorporate the costs of CO2 emissions causing climate change. Normative, yeah? Why? Yeah. Well, I think you have talked about this in other lectures. This is a so-called external effect. Combustion engines are emitting CO2 in order to go from point A to point B. This just happens. This has an impact on our environment. Here at the sea, we are seeing that the water level is increasing. We also see that it rains more, we have more storms and anything else. This has then an economic impact. And then we could say, from a normative point of view, well, if you are causing this, then you have to pay for this. But this is a statement, this is a judgment. This do not has to be the case. And here in Europe, I'm quite happy, but this is my normative view, that we are caring about this, going 6,000 kilometers over the Atlantic Ocean. There, at least 50% of the inhabitants, they do not care about this. They say, well, what should we do with these rubbish windmills and anything else? Okay, and the last one, especially for Germany, 500 billion infrastructure and climate change program. Maybe you have read about this when we changed the government in January, February, March this year. The 500 billion euro infrastructure and climate program of the German government reduces due to higher interest payments the national budget and therefore tightens the possibilities of you, because you are the young generations. What do you think? Positive. And why is it positive? Because if you just read this, you would say, well, that's not that's not nice. But why can we argue that it is positive? So again, what is the mechanism behind it? So where come the higher interest payments from? Because of this infrastructure program. Because unfortunately, our society, or in Germany, for the public budget, we don't have these 500 billion euros. Well, we are very, very clever. We will, within this lecture, we will then talk about public debt and then we will calculate also the relation of public debt versus gross domestic product, so economic performance. And we are very clever because we just say, we define, we don't count these money. We just say it is out of the books. But of course, since we do not have this money, we have to increase our debt although we don't write it into the books, it is there, and we are issuing government bonds for this. And for these government bonds, the public has to pay an interest. And the higher the debt, the higher will be the interest payment. This is, of course, then also depending on the interest rate. If this is even also rising, then it will be even more. And we had a quite very nice situation in Germany between the two crises, between Corona and the global financial crisis, because then the interest rate level was more or less zero. For Germany, it was even negative. So when we have issued government bonds, we have earned money. We said, please give me 100 euros. I will repay you 90. And you have bought it. But right now, the situation again changed. Right now, we have to pay roughly 3% interest on our government bonds. Okay, then that's it for today. And then we see on Thursday, and I will then see if I have organized. But I think already you are next Tuesday. You have your meeting. Yep. Okay, then thank you very much for today.